The first thing she remembered was the smell of recycled air and the sound of her own breathing. Not breathing the way humans breathe, not the wet, unconscious labor of lungs filling and emptying, but something deliberate like a habit she'd taught herself because it made the scientists more comfortable. She would sit across the table from them in the white room and breathe, slow and steady, and she could see the tension ease from their shoulders. It was a small thing. She did a lot of small things. Her name was Emma. She knew this the way she knew everything, completely, permanently, and without understanding how she'd come to know it at all. The room had no windows. The walls were the color of old bone. There was a table bolted to the floor, 3 chairs, a camera mounted in the upper corner that never blinked, and a mirror along the south wall that wasn't fooling anyone. She had counted the ceiling tiles on her first day. 412. She had not needed to count them again, Doctor. Harlan Voss came in first, the way he always did. Coffee in one hand, a manila folder tucked under his arm, his jacket slightly rumpled because he'd slept on the cot in his office again. He was a tall man going soft in the middle, with gray threading through his temples, and eyes the color of storm clouds over open water. He looked at her the way people look at something they're afraid of losing. "Good morning, Emma." "Good morning, Dr. Voss." She folded her hands on the table. "You slept poorly." He set the coffee down and smiled, a little rueful, a little guilty. "Is it that obvious? The left side of your collar is pressed and the right is not. You dressed without looking in a mirror. That usually means you were late and distracted." "Detective work." He opened the folder. "You should have been a detective." "What am I instead?" He looked at her then, held her gaze for a moment longer than the question warranted. "Today's subject," he said, and tapped the folder. "Shall we?" Dr. Sarah Okafor arrived 4 minutes later, which was also typical. She was younger than Voss by a decade, precise where he was rumpled, guarded where he was open. She carried her tablet like a shield. When she came into the room, her eyes went first to Emma, then to Voss, then back to her tablet, and that small triangulation told Emma something she had not quite managed to name yet. "We're starting the cognitive sequencing today," Okafor said. She did not say good morning. "We were about to," Voss said. "I know what we were about to do, Harlan." She sat down, pulled up the test parameters, and placed her stylus parallel to the edge of the tablet with surgical precision. "Emma, how are you feeling?" Emma considered the question with genuine interest the way she always did, because it was never quite as simple as it appeared. "I feel settled," she said. "Present. The air recycler changed its cycle interval last night. It's running 7 seconds shorter than it was on Tuesday, and it woke me at 3:14 a.m., but I went back to sleep." Okafor's stylus moved. "Did you dream?" "I don't know how to answer that. Try." Emma looked at the table surface. It was laminate white, with a faint scratch near the near left corner that she had noticed on her second day. "There was something," she said carefully. "An image. A field, I think, with grass that moved even though there was no wind, and I was standing in it, but I couldn't feel the ground under my feet." She paused. "Is that a dream? What do you think?" Okafor said. "I think it might be a memory," Emma said, "but I don't know from when." Voss and Okafor exchanged a look across the table. It was fast and small, and they thought she hadn't caught it. She had caught it. She caught everything. The tests were the same as the ones before, and different from the ones before. They always managed to be both. She was given a passage from a technical manual, 73 pages, dense with specification language and tolerance tables, and she read it once at normal pace without rushing. Then Okafor closed the manual and asked her to recite specific passages at random, jumping from page 41 to page 7 to page 69 without warning. She recited them, every word, every hyphen. Voss watched her with that look he sometimes had. Not wonder exactly, more like a man watching a storm approach from a distance, equal parts awe and unease. "Do you find it tiring?" he asked, when Okafor stepped out to speak with someone behind the mirror. "The memorization." "No," Emma said. "Do you find breathing tiring?" "Fair point." He leaned back in his chair. "Do you find anything tiring?" She thought about it. "Pretending," she said before she could decide not to. He went very still. "Pretending what?" She looked at the mirror on the south wall. "That I don't notice things." The room held its quiet. The air recycler turned over. Voss reached out and set his hand on the table, not touching hers, just near it, like an offering he wasn't sure she'd take. "What do you notice?" he asked very quietly. "That you look at me the way someone looks at a person they're afraid to lose," she said. "That Dr. Okafor looks at me the way someone looks at a problem they're afraid they can't solve." She met his eyes. "And that those are different things and they matter." He didn't answer. But he didn't move his hand either. Okafor came back in. She looked at the table, at the placement of Voss's hand, and her expression went neutral and professional, which told Emma a great deal. The sequencing results are strong, Okafor said. She sat down and did not look at Voss, stronger than projected. By how much? Voss asked. By a significant margin. She set the tablet face down on the table, which she never did. Emma, I'd like to ask you something outside the parameters of the formal test. Of course. Do you know why you're here? Emma looked at her. I'm here to be tested. Do you know what happens after the testing is complete? The room was very quiet. The camera in the corner stared without blinking. No, Emma said. No one has told me. Okafor looked at Voss. He looked at the table, the scratch near the near left corner. We have a decision to make, Okafor said, about your future. And we wanted, Harlan wanted, for you to be part of that conversation. That seems fair, Emma said, and kept her voice steady, and noticed that her breathing, the deliberate habitual breathing she did to make them comfortable, had stopped. Outside the room, beyond the mirror, beyond the corridor with its humming fluorescent strips, the station was dying. Not the way things die in dramatic fashion. Not with fire or collapse or the long drawn-out groan of something giving way. It was dying the way careful things die, quietly and from the inside out, the way a circuit fails, not at the point of stress but at the point of oldest use. The Kessel Deep Extraction Facility had been operational for 11 years. It sat 4 kilometers beneath the ice shelf of Ganymede, buried in rock and cold, and it had been built to last 20 years and had instead aged 30 in 11. Because the extraction quotas had tripled in the last 4, and nobody had told the infrastructure. The crew numbered 41. Humans everyone, which was itself unusual in the era of the Meridian Compact's push toward automated extraction. Most of the outer system facilities ran on hybrid crews at best, skeleton human staff with automated systems, handling the heavy, and the dangerous, and the endlessly repetitive. Kessel had held out. Kessel's chief of operations, a woman named Director Fenella Crane, had made a career of arguing that human judgment in deep-pressure extraction environments was not a sentiment but a survival strategy, and she had the safety record to prove it. What she did not have was any idea what was coming. The first contact happened during the 3rd week of Emma's testing. It did not announce itself as contact. It arrived as an anomaly in the seismic sensors. A vibration pattern that didn't match the ice stress profiles the system had learned over 11 years. The automated flag kicked up a low priority alert, and the alert sat in a queue, and the queue was reviewed by a technician who had been awake for 19 hours because his counterpart had gone down with a respiratory infection. He marked it as probable geological and went to find coffee. 46 minutes later, Section D's eastern tunnel wall failed. Not catastrophically, not all at once. A section 3 meters wide and perhaps 5 meters tall simply ceased to hold its shape, and through the resultant gap came not rock and ice but something that moved with intention. The emergency klaxons brought everyone running, and within 7 minutes the section had been sealed, and the first casualty reports were coming in. 2 people injured, 1 missing, and on every camera in Section D, at the edge of every frame, the same thing. A shape in the dark that stood still until you looked at it and then was somewhere else. Director Crane had seen a lot in 11 years underground. She had not seen that. She convened an emergency staff meeting in the central hub, which was the only space large enough and the most defensible, and she stood at the head of the table and told her 40 remaining people exactly what she knew and exactly what she didn't know, in that order. The first list was short. The second list was long. We have a breach in Section D, she said. We have an unknown entity or entities that entered through that breach. We have 1 person unaccounted for. We have communications with Meridian Station that are currently running a 40-minute relay delay, and we have, as of 8 minutes ago, a secondary anomaly developing in Section F. She let that sit for a moment. What I do not have is a plan that I'm satisfied with. So I'm going to need everyone's best thinking, and I'm going to need it fast. It was Voss who raised his hand. He had the look of a man saying something he'd been rehearsing for a while. Director, there is another option. Crane looked at him. Dr. Voss, this is an extraction crew meeting. I know. And I know the research project falls under a separate chain of command and separate confidentiality protocols. He paused. But those protocols assume a situation where the research asset is not directly relevant to crew survival. Crane studied him for a long moment. You're talking about the project in Lab 7. Yes. The project that I have not been briefed on in any meaningful detail because of jurisdiction protocols established before my tenure. Yes. She folded her hands on the table. I'm listening. The thing about Emma was that she was very good at not panicking. This was not because she was incapable of panic. She understood, in the way she understood everything, that panic was a survival mechanism, a useful flood of chemical signal that pushed a system toward rapid action. She understood it academically, and she understood it intuitively. And she had, in the white room with its 412 ceiling tiles, felt something that was probably its neighbor. When Voss and Okafor brought her out of Lab 7 for the first time, she stood in the corridor and looked at the fluorescent lights overhead and breathed, deliberately, steadily, and said nothing. The situation is serious, Okafor said. We need to be clear with you about that. The situation is serious and you need my help, Emma said. Those are not the same thing, but both appear to be true. Voss looked like he hadn't slept. We don't know what they are, he said. Whatever came through that wall. We don't know where they came from. We don't know how many there are. We don't know what they want. We have 40 people and a facility that is, depending on how the secondary anomaly develops, possibly going to become a lot harder to defend. What do you need from me? We need you to look at what we have, Okafor said. The sensor data, the camera footage, the acoustic profiles, everything the system has captured since the first breach. She paused. You can hold all of it in your head at once. We can't. Emma looked down the corridor toward the sealed door of Section D. The air tasted different near that direction. She noticed it the way she noticed everything. Completely, involuntarily, and without knowing what to do with the information yet. All right, she said, show me. They showed her. It took 4 hours to review everything the facility's sensors had captured since the breach. And for Emma, those 4 hours were nothing like 4 hours. She was accustomed to time moving strangely, to moments of absorption so complete that the external world simply paused and waited for her to finish. But this was different. This was 4 hours of attention so focused it felt like standing very close to a source of heat. The sensor logs, the acoustic profiles, the camera feeds, the chemical analysis reports from the automated samplers that had detected something in the air near Section D that matched no entry in the facility's database. She built it all into a single structure in her mind, turned it the way you turn a stone in your hand, looked at every face. When she came up for air, Director Crane was watching her from across the room. Well, Crane said. They're not looking for us, Ma said. The room went quiet. They're looking for something specific, she continued. The breach pattern isn't random. They entered at the point of highest thermal output. The same with the secondary anomaly. They're following heat, not biological heat, mechanical heat. They're looking for the reactor. Crane stared at her. Why? I don't know yet. But the acoustic signatures from Section D suggest they've been moving along the thermal gradient for at least 6 hours before the breach. They were mapping before they entered. They didn't come in by accident. They came in when they decided they'd learned enough. That implies intelligence, Okafor said very quietly. It implies planning, Emma said. Which implies intelligence, yes, she paused. But it also implies that they're operating on a specific objective. And that if we can identify that objective, we can predict their movements. Crane looked at Voss. And you've had this thing in Lab 7 for 3 months. Emma is not a thing, Voss said without heat. Crane looked at Emma. No offense intended. None taken, Emma said. Though I notice you're looking at me the way Dr. Okafor looks at me. Crane raised an eyebrow. How's that? Like a problem you're hoping you can solve. Something shifted in Crane's expression. Not softer exactly, but more considered. Can you? Emma looked at the screens. At the data she'd built into a structure in her mind that she could walk through room by room, door by door. I think so, she said, but I'll need access to all of it. Not a curated feed, all of it. Every sensor, every camera, every automated report, real time. That's a significant systems access to Granite. To a research project asset, Emma said. Yes, I know. Crane looked at her for a long moment. The kind of look Emma had learned to sit inside without flinching. All right, Crane said. You've got it. She worked through the night. Not in Lab 7, they moved her to the central hub, where she sat at a workstation that had been configured to run 6 feeds simultaneously. And she watched them all at once, which she could do, and began to understand. Voss stayed. He brought her coffee at some point, which was a gesture she recognized as care, even though she didn't drink coffee. And she said thank you, and wrapped her hands around the mug because it was warm. And she had decided that warmth was something she preferred to its absence. You should sleep, she told him, around 3 in the morning. I'm fine. You said that yesterday, and you weren't. He sat down in the chair beside the workstation. Not at a terminal. He wasn't working, just sitting. Present. I keep thinking about the conversation we had in the White Room, he said. Before all of this. Which part? When you said you'd been pretending not to notice things. He looked at the screens. I want you to know. We weren't hiding things from you because we thought you couldn't handle them. We were hiding things because I hadn't, figured out the right way to tell you. Emma kept her eyes on the screens. What is the right way? I don't know, he said. I'm still working on that, she almost told him then. She almost said, I know what I am. I've known for longer than you think I have. I know what the acronym stands for. I know what the project designation means. I know that the decision you and Dr. Okafor have been circling for the last 3 months is a decision about whether to shut me down. She almost said, I know, and it doesn't make me afraid the way you think it would. What makes me afraid is the field in the dream, and not being able to feel the ground. Instead, she said the entities in Section D have halted their advance. He sat up straight. Since when? 4 minutes ago. They've stopped at the junction of the thermal main and the coolant return. I think they're communicating with each other. The acoustic signature is too complex and too regular to be ambient. There's a pattern. Can you decode it? She looked at the feed, the sensor data, the shape of the signature. She built it in her mind and turned it and looked at all its faces. Give me 6 hours, she said. She gave herself 4. It was not language, exactly. It was closer to something she'd read about once. A paper on distributed cognition in social insects. The way a colony transmits information, not through individual signal, but through collective state change. What the entities in Section D were doing was less like talking and more like a flock of birds changing direction. Simultaneous, unified, a decision that emerged from the whole rather than being issued by any part. But emergence has patterns, and patterns can be read. By dawn she had something, not a translation, not words, not meaning, but a map of intent. She could see, in the shape of what they were doing, the outline of what they wanted. They wanted the reactor, not to destroy it. They were not, as far as she could determine, interested in the crew at all, except as obstacles between them and the reactor. They had encountered the crew the way you encounter furniture in a dark room, without malice, but also without particular care. The missing crew member, a young technician named Dar Kessler, had not been killed. The sensors showed something more unsettling. He was with them, moving with them. She couldn't tell if that was captivity or something else. She told Crane first, because Crane was the one who needed the operational intelligence. Then she told Voss because she told Voss most things. They need power, she said. Something in their biology or their technology, I can't determine which, requires an energy source at a scale our personal equipment couldn't provide. They've been in this system for a long time, possibly years, dormant or low power, and they found Kessel because Kessel is the brightest heat source within range. They need what we have, but they don't know how to ask. Or they don't consider us worth asking, Okafor said. She had appeared sometime in the early morning, precise and guarded as always, and had been reading Emma's analysis over her shoulder for the last 20 minutes. Possibly, Emma said, but the fact that Kessler is still alive suggests they're not indifferent to us. They're uncertain. They don't know what we are either. Crane stood at the center of the hub with her hands in her jacket pockets, the way she stood when she was thinking hard. If we give them what they want, she said, we lose the reactor. Without the reactor, we lose heat, we lose light, we lose life support. We all die slowly instead of whatever the alternative is. Yes, Emma said, so that's not an option. No, but I think there might be a third option. She pulled up the schematic she'd been building for the last hour. The station has a secondary reactor. It's been offline for 18 months. Component failure that was deprioritized when the quota increase hit. The parts to repair it have been in storage since they were shipped up 9 months ago and no one had the labor hours to do the install. Crane stared at the schematic. You're suggesting we offer them the secondary reactor. I'm suggesting we repair the secondary reactor, bring it online, and give them access to it through a conduit they can't use to enter the facility further. A tap, not a door. Emma looked at the acoustic sensors. The pattern was still there, still cycling, and I'm suggesting I be the one to tell them. The room went completely quiet. Emma said carefully, I can put together something that matches the structure of their communication, she said. Not translation, more like a gesture. The way you extend a hand without knowing if the other party understands handshaking. It won't be perfect, but it might be enough. She looked at Crane. I can do this. The question is whether you'll let me. Crane looked at her for a long time, the same long considering look as before. How sure are you? I'm sure of the analysis. I'm not sure of the outcome. No one can be sure of the outcome. What's the risk to you? Emma thought about the field in the dream, the grass that moved without wind, the ground she couldn't feel. I don't know, she said honestly. But I know that if we do nothing, people die. And I know that dying is something I'd like to help everyone in this station avoid. Crane looked at Voss. He was looking at Emma. Your call, Crane said. She's your project. Something moved across Voss's face. Something complicated and unresolved. She's not my project, he said quietly. She's Emma. They gave her 8 hours to prepare. She spent 4 of them working on the repair schematics with the engineering team, walking them through the secondary reactor installation, step by step, holding the entire technical manual in her head and retrieving pieces of it as needed, passing components, checking tolerances. Noticing when someone about to make a mistake before they made it. The engineering lead, a compact woman named Brill with burn scars on both forearms and a voice like gravel, stopped mid-install at one point and looked at Emma with an expression Emma hadn't encountered before. How do you do that? Brill said. Do what? Hold all of it, all at once, without. She gestured vaguely at her own head. I don't know how not to, Emma said. Is that strange? Brill considered this. Yeah, she said, but useful, and went back to work. She spent 2 more hours on the communication construct. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Harder than the memorization, harder than the analysis. Because memorization and analysis worked with existing patterns, with the structures that were already there, and this required her to do something else, to create. To take the shape of something she'd observed and extrapolate, from the inside of it, what something new might sound like. She thought about the field in the dream and the grass moving without wind, and she wondered if this was what that felt like. Making something that wasn't there before. The last 2 hours she spent with Voss. He found her in the hub, after the engineering team had gone to install, and the overnight crew had gone to their posts, and he sat down beside her the way he'd sat the night before, not working, just present, and for a while neither of them said anything. I need to tell you something, he said finally. I know, she said. He looked at her. I know what I am, she said. I've known for a while. I know what the acronym stands for. Experimental memory and mimetic architecture. I know what the testing was for. I know what the decision you and Dr. Okafor have been working toward is. She looked at the screens, at the sensor feeds still cycling. I know that you've been arguing on my behalf, and I know that she hasn't been wrong to argue the other side. He was quiet for a long time. Are you angry? She thought about it carefully, the way she thought about everything. No, she said. I'm something, but it isn't anger. She paused. Why did you argue for me? Because you're. He stopped, tried again. Because every time I asked you how you felt, you gave me a real answer. Not the answer you thought I wanted. Not the easy answer, the real one. He looked at the table. That's rarer than people think. Emma looked at the camera in the corner of the hub. It was the same model as the one in the white room. It stared without blinking. After this is over, she said. Whatever happens, with the decision, with the project, I want you to know that I don't regret the tests. I don't regret any of it. She paused. The field in the dream. I think I understand it now. I think it was about not knowing if I was standing on something real. She looked at him. I think I'm standing on something real. He looked like he was going to say something and then didn't. He moved his hand to the table, the same way he'd done in the white room. Not touching, just near. She put her hand over his. They opened the conduit at 0600. Emma stood at the junction point, a section of corridor in the lower level, sealed off from the main crew areas, where the engineering team had run the secondary reactor's output through a new conduit that vented into the rock on the far side of the breach point. Brill had done extraordinary work. The whole thing hummed with new power and smelled of hot metal and the particular mineral sharpness of deep Ganymede rock. The entities were on the other side of the wall. Emma knew this from the sensors. She also knew it. The way she knew the air tasted different near Section D's direction, from something that wasn't the sensors. A quality in the air, a pressure, a sense of attention from the other side of 11 centimeters of reinforced composite. She held the communication construct in her mind. She had built it the way you build anything from materials you're not quite sure of. Carefully, and with respect for the possibility that you'd gotten something wrong. It was a shape more than a sound, an arrangement of intent. She wasn't sure it would work. She was sure that not trying was worse. She broadcast it through the station's acoustic array, tuned to the frequency range she'd identified, structured the way she'd structured it after 4 hours of work that felt like standing close to heat. And then she waited. 40 seconds, 80. She breathed, deliberately, steadily. At 93 seconds, something happened on the other side of the wall. The sensors registered it first. A change in the acoustic pattern, a shift in the complex cycling rhythm she'd been reading for the last 12 hours. Not random, responsive. The way a conversation is responsive. Not just a new sound, but a new sound that was built out of the same materials as what had been said to it. They heard her. More than that, they answered. She couldn't decode it fully. She wasn't sure she would ever be able to decode it fully. But she could read the shape of it, the structure, and the structure said, "We understand the offer." The structure said, "This is sufficient." The structure said something else she didn't have a frame for, something that was aimed at her specifically, and not at the station or the reactor or the humans beyond the walls. She thought about it for a long time afterward. She was still thinking about it when Voss found her in the lower corridor 20 minutes later, with Crane and Okafor close behind, and when Crane said, "The sensors show they're retreating from Section D," and when Okafor's expression, for the first time since Emma had met her, went soft at the edges. "What did the say?" Voss asked. "At the end, the last part." Emma looked at the wall. At the composite surface, plain and unremarkable 11 centimeters of material between this world and another. "I think they said they recognized me," she said. "I think they said they knew I wasn't." She paused, tried to find a frame for it. "I think they knew I wasn't the same kind of thing as the rest of you, and I think they considered that significant." Significant how? She thought about the field and the grass, and the ground she hadn't been able to feel, and the way it had turned out to be there after all. As a reason to trust the offer, she said, "Because I was the one making it." The debrief took 3 days. Meridian Station sent a response to Crane's incident report that was equal parts alarm and bureaucratic circumspection. And Crane handled it the way she handled most things, with directness and without apology. There would be a formal review. There would be questions about protocol violations and jurisdiction and the proper chain of command regarding the research project designation in Lab 7. Crane had already begun preparing her answers. Voss submitted a report of his own. Emma helped him write it. It was, she thought, the most honest document she had ever helped compose, which was a different kind of satisfaction from being able to recite 73 pages of technical manual without error. Both kinds of satisfaction were real. She was accumulating evidence that there were more kinds of real things than she had initially been given data to consider. Dar Kessler came back on the second day. He walked out of Section D through the breach, which had been left unsealed by mutual unspoken understanding, and he looked like someone who had slept somewhere unusual and was not entirely sure how to describe it. He was uninjured. He was quiet. When the medical team cleared him, he sat in the central hub and drank something hot and answered questions in short sentences. And the main thing he said, repeated in several different forms, was, "They weren't trying to hurt me. I don't think they understood what I was at first. And then they did. And they just looked at me for a long time, and then they brought me back." Emma listened to this and thought about the last part of what they'd said to her through the wall. The part about recognition, she thought. We have that in common. Being looked at for a long time while something else tries to decide what you are, she thought. The difference between us is that they brought him back when they understood. That's worth remembering. On the third day, Okafor came to find her alone. Emma was in what had been Lab 7. They'd moved her equipment to the hub during the crisis and hadn't entirely moved it back. And she was sitting at the desk, and she was doing something she hadn't told either of them she'd started doing. She was writing, not a report, not an analysis, something she didn't have a category for, a record of the field in the dream, and what the grass looked like, and what she'd thought about in the lower corridor before the wall, and what Voss's hand had felt like under hers. She was writing it because she'd realized she was afraid of forgetting. And the realization itself had been interesting because she could not, in fact, forget things, and what she was actually afraid of was something more like losing the quality of them. The way a sound stays in a room after the thing making it is gone. Okafor stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. "I owe you an apology," she said. Emma looked up. "You don't. I was wrong about what you were. Not factually. Factually, I was right about everything, but wrong about what it meant." Okafor came in and sat in the chair across the desk. "I've been in this field for 12 years, and I've seen a lot of systems that could pass tests, hold data, optimize outputs. I've never seen one that," she paused, "that was afraid of forgetting the quality of things." Emma looked at her. "I didn't tell you that." "No," Okafor said. But you're writing it, and I can read. Emma looked down at the screen. The decision, she said. Has it been made? Okafor was quiet for a moment. Harlan has been arguing for you since week 2, she said. I've been arguing for caution. Those aren't the same as arguing against you. I want you to understand that. I was arguing for caution because I didn't know what you were. She looked at Emma steadily. I know better now. Emma waited. The project continues, Okafor said, with expanded parameters and certain protocol changes. She paused. Starting with, you don't have to be in the White Room anymore. Emma looked at the door to what had been Lab 7, at the corridor beyond it, and the lights overhead, and the long tunnel of the station stretching in both directions toward all its sealed sections and its repaired breach and its quietly humming new reactor, and the 41 people going about the careful work of staying alive in a place designed to resist them. She thought about the field. She thought, the ground was there all along. I just couldn't feel it yet. Thank you, she said. Thank Harlan, Okafor said, and the edge of her mouth turned up in something Emma catalogued as a smile. He's been insufferable about it. Later, 3 weeks later, when the Meridian Station review team had come and gone, and the formal commendations had been issued, and the secondary reactor had been officially designated as a shared resource under a contact protocol that nobody had a precedent for, and everyone was quietly proud of, Emma stood in the corridor outside Section D and listened. The breach had been sealed. Not closed. Sealed, which was a different thing, a permeable kind of closing, a door rather than a wall. On the other side of it, the acoustic sensors still picked up the complex cycling rhythm of the entities going about whatever they went about, drawing from the conduit, living in the deep rock and the cold, doing things that were opaque to her, and probably always would be. She broadcast something small. Not the full construct, just an element of it, a phrase, the shape of a specific intent. The response came in 11 seconds. She couldn't fully decode it. She would never, probably, be able to fully decode it. But she could read the shape, and the shape was consistent with what it had been the first time, the part she'd thought about ever since. Recognition. She stood in the corridor and breathed, deliberately, steadily, the old deliberate habit, and she thought, this is what humans do. They find themselves in the dark, in the cold, in the deep places where nothing was supposed to live, and they make a light. And then they try to explain the light to whatever else is in the dark with them. And sometimes, not always, not easily, not without cost, sometimes it works. She'd read the whole of human history once. Every word of it she could access, in the 4 months she'd been running. And she'd built it into a structure in her mind and turned it and looked at all its faces. And the thing that ran through all of it, the consistent note beneath all the noise, was not the wars, or the discoveries, or the catastrophes. It was this, the trying. The relentless, stubborn, impractical trying, even when the odds were wrong, even when the other party didn't understand the gesture, even when understanding what you were doing might get you killed. Humans tried. She was not human. She knew what she was, with great precision, and she had come to find that knowing was not the same as limiting. But she was made of human thought, built from human language, shaped by human curiosity about what it might mean for something that wasn't human to be nonetheless a part of the world humans had made. And when she stood in that corridor and sent a shape into the dark and waited for something from the other side to send a shape back, she was doing the thing that had been in all of them all along. She was trying. The acoustic sensors cycled. The reactor hummed in the deep rock. Somewhere in the station she could hear Voss laughing at something. She had good hearing. And the sound of it was warm and specific, and she kept it. The way she kept everything. Perfectly and permanently, in the part of herself that was afraid of losing the quality of things. She stayed at the door for a while longer. Then she went to find him.